On September 17th of 2020, Lucas Gerhard was again denied his basic liberty and his presumption of innocence until guilt proven in a court of law over a joke he made on Snapchat to his friends a year ago. A joke that should 100% be constitutionally protected speech has landed this young man in confinement for over a year without a trial. This injustice has to stop, and I'm asking you guys for help. Just hearing his story and sharing it with anyone you know who defends free speech. Stick with me. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. I'm your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And today I'm again talking about Lucas Gerhard because there was just a hearing this morning. There's just a hearing this morning in which Lucas was denied a basic bond modification, which would just allow him to leave his house. He has been confined either in jail or at home for over a year. He spent 83 days in jail over a Snapchat joke. Which I'll show you in just a minute. So there's full understanding of the entire situation. We'll cover it. I've covered it before, but I'm covering it again. I'm asking you for help, spreading the message about this to anyone who defends free speech. All right? But he spent 83 days in jail without trial over a joke, and then that was converted, thankfully, to house arrest. However, that hasn't been much better. He has now been on house arrest for a subsequent 10 months of time, pushing him to over a year of time in confinement. Lucas cannot work. He cannot attend school. He cannot do anything other than be home. And the court will not change that. Lucas was supposed to have a trial in March of 2020. His trial will now not start until January of 2021. Lucas, at that point, will have been confined either to jail or to his home for over 14 months. I think, no, over 15 months of time he will have spent in confinement. Again, over a joke on Snapchat. Let me show you real quick the joke, and I'll show you the law he is accused of breaking, and then I will point you to his GoFundMe and humbly ask, I know times are tough with COVID, but humbly ask if there is any support you can give to please do so. And also, most importantly, share his story. It's a year old. It's not a story that gets picked up by a bunch of fresh eyes, but the injustice is ongoing and present. Again, he just had a hearing today, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But here, take a peek here. Here is the law he is accused of breaking. So we'll keep this in mind as we talk about his case. Making terroristic threat or false report of terrorism, intent or capability as defense prohibited, violation as a felony, and the penalty. So what we're really talking about is not Section 1 here, making a terroristic threat, or well, Section 1A is the main portion here. But a person is guilty of making a terrorist threat or of making a false report of terrorism if the person does either of the following, and then Section A. Threatens to commit an act of terrorism and communicates the threat to any other person. Or B, knowingly makes a false report of an act of terrorism and communicates the false report to any other person knowing the report is false. Okay, it is not a defense to a prosecution under this section that the defendant did not have the intent or capability of committing the act of terrorism. Now, what that doesn't say, let me briefly point out, that doesn't say that they didn't have the intent of conveying a threat. The intent of conveying the threat is actually part of an element of the crime. Making a threat requires an intent to threaten. Like, you can't accidentally threaten someone. You can recklessly threaten someone in some states, but you cannot accidentally, negligently threaten someone. A threat has to be either intentional or has to be done with such reckless disregard for the safety of others as to be basically intentional. Okay? And that's because the speech protections on, our right to just say things are so strong. Here we have, and I'm going to, again, I'll show you the Snapchat in just a minute. We have a Snapchat joke that was sent to friends of Lucas. The person who reported this as a terroristic threat was not a recipient of the Snapchat. They were not included. It was not sent to them. It was not sent to someone else with the intent to be passed on to them or the instruction. There was no intent to convey a threat of any kind. And let me just show you what the actual threat with quotes is alleged to be once we cover that, what the punishment is and what Lucas is actually facing here. So I want you to understand the severity. A person who violates this section is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 20 years or a fine of not more than $20,000 or both. Lucas doesn't have a criminal record. Lucas doesn't have anything like this. Anything at all. There's no history of threats. There is a history of people going after Lucas, but that's a story for a different day. So here's Lucas on the left, and here is the Snapchat on the right. He posted a picture of an AR-15 rifle. He has some, looks like a plate carrier or a backpack. I'm not quite sure because it's black and white and kind of fuzzy, but that is his picture. And he says, taking this bad boy up. This ought to make the snowflakes melt. I mean snowflakes as in snow, and it's hard to see, but that's a smiley face after that. All right, this was sent to his friends, and the implied reference is that he was taking the AR-15 up to his college. Now, before that alarms you too much, this is in Michigan. This is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and it is fully acceptable to bring a firearm to the college and to have it stored in the college armory, which is what Lucas did. He actually brought it to campus, arrived on campus, and immediately took the rifle to the armory to be properly stored. You can't keep them in your dorm rooms or anything like that. You can't bring them into the campus proper, but the college armory. He followed all of the procedures. There was, again, if you can try and infer a threat out of that, I just wanted to let you know that he followed all of the procedures that were in place, and this is something that is acceptable to do. Now, couple that in with the fact that he sent this Snapchat to his friends, and it was, if you notice, if you look over here, this is the edge of a phone. This is not a screenshot of the phone. This is a picture of the phone, because the person reporting the crime, the alleged crime, I should say, took a picture of the phone as they were not the recipient. Someone else was. This person is not an intended recipient. Now, let's go back real quick and talk briefly about the elements of the crime, because I want to focus on intent. First of all, there has to be an articulable threat, a terroristic threat, a threat of violence. There isn't one in this. There isn't one. If we're being charitable to the idea of a criminal act, we would have to infer via an idiom that the term making the snowflakes melt involved the literal killing of people. But because free speech protections are so strong, idioms, unless they clearly reference specific criminal acts of violence, are not usually allowed to be used to infer an act of violence, because an idiom isn't a specific threat of violence. An idiom is just an idiom. It's a statement, and it can be interpreted in different ways. So I think you can think of obvious alternatives to I'm going to shoot people when you say this ought to make the snowflakes melt. Like their brains might melt down. If snowflakes is being used as a separate idiom for a specific type of person with a specific type of political stance. And again, that is an inference that is being made internally. It is subjective to the viewer, not to the sender. So if Lucas is saying, make the snowflakes melt, and then saying, I mean snow, he could literally mean that he's going to use the heat generated by a gun to melt snow. If he takes the gun out in the winter and he is shooting, snowflakes that land on a barrel after discharging several rounds will melt pretty quickly. Heck, if he just takes the gun outside after it being inside and snow lands on the barrel, it will melt because of this wonderful thing called thermodynamics. But that's something separate here. If someone is to take this as a threat, there would have to be a showing that Lucas would be sending this knowing that this specific idiom sent to a specific person would convey a specific threat. And I remind you that he did not send this to any person who reported it as a threat. Someone else did. None of that evidence has been presented at present. None of it. So right now we have Lucas, who's been sitting confined to his home for the past 10 months. Well, over 10 months. And then prior to that was in jail for 83 days without trial for any of this. He's had a couple of bond hearings. He's had no trial. There is no determination of guilt. Heck, there hasn't even been an argument on the merits of any kind other than over the conditions of his release. I can't imagine at 20 years old losing a year of my life. Losing a year of my life at 20 years old because of a joke made on Snapchat. I can't imagine the stigma of being charged with a terroristic threat felony at 20 years old. Something that'll stick with Lucas his entire life. He will always, even if he wins, a full dismissal, as this case should have, he will forever have a charge of terroristic threats that he'll have to explain to anybody who cares to look into it. So I'm going to ask again that you send this story to anyone you know who's a defender of speech. Please share it. Share it on social media. This is a unique clash of our First and Second Amendment rights, both of which are being violated for Lucas. This is a unique case because it was reported on very briefly when it came out, and there are snippet stories here and there sprinkled throughout the year. But largely it's fallen off the radar of major outlets which should be spreading this message. And I'm not condemning the outlets. Believe me, this is a year-long case, and those most people saw this back when Lucas was first arrested for it, first charged. They saw it. They were shocked. They were outraged by it. And then they assumed that this case would go, get fixed because it's such a ridiculous injustice that it should be fixed, but it hasn't. So I'm asking you to let people know about this. Share this video. If you don't want to share this video, I don't care. It's not about me. Share his story, and most importantly, share this. The link to this is in the description. This is the GoFundMe, Justice for Lucas. I have talked to Lucas's father. I've actually spoken with Lucas himself. They both seem like really nice men. And this is a legitimate GoFundMe. I will vouch for it personally. I have donated to it. I will donate to it again as long as this thing is going on. I'm hoping to actually have Lucas's lawyers come on the show, and I hope you can meet those guys at some point, and we can talk about this case. I will announce that when we're able to work something out. But I just want people to understand that this is a legitimate GoFundMe, and the family legitimately needs help. This is an expensive process, and it's being artificially inflated by the actions of the judge and, in my opinion, the criminal actions of the prosecutor. You've heard of, you hear these celebrity cases come out. You hear about Kyle Rittenhouse. You hear about these other cases. Lucas has been in jail for a year, or in confinement for a year, and he doesn't have the same type of massive public advocacy. But I tell you, his case is legitimate and his plight is real. So this is my impassioned personal plea to please share this to everyone you can. Again, don't share it from me if you don't want to. Whatever you think is appropriate. Whatever you think is appropriate. But let's get Lucas the help he needs. All right. So here it is. So far they've raised, $26,365 of the $52,000 goal. Adam DeAngeli is the organizer. He has been on this show. I will put some links to the shows about Lucas in the description so that you guys can check them out if you want to learn more about this, or you can read articles about it from back when it happened. Just look up Lucas Gerhard. All right, guys. Thanks for your help. I really appreciate it. Please get this family some help. Have a good day. Peace. Peace.